Day 80, I'm reading If God is Love, page 100. In his book Beyond Words, Frederick Buchner writes, "The kind of work God usually calls you to is the kind of work, A, that you need most to do, and B, that the world most needs to have done. Much of the unhappiness we experience at work is because we're not doing what fills us with joy and the world with goodness. This misery is obvious in many low status jobs, but it also plagues boardrooms. We will inevitably be miserable, no matter how high the salary, exalted the title, or generous the benefits, if we are not doing something that makes the world a more gracious place. Tani Campolo, a Christian activist, tells the story of the young college student he took on a mission trip to Haiti. They toured that impoverished land, worked in its clinics, taught in its school, spent long evenings talking with its people. At the end of the trip, the young man promised Tani that he was going to go to the medical school and someday return to Haiti. Years later, Tani was speaking in the city and ran into this former student on the street. Tani threw his arms around him, asked him how he was. The man was strangely reserved. Tani asked, "How are you? Did you go to med school? Did you become a doctor?" The man answered, "Yes, I did." Tani said, "Wonderful. What's your specialty?" The man hesitated. "I'm a plastic surgeon." Tani said, "It must be exciting to heal burn victims and disabled children." Reluctantly, the man admitted his specialty was cosmetic surgery for rich socialities. He had never returned to Haiti. Tani followed that story with the story of another young college student, bright, African American, pre-law. He graduated from college and then law school with the highest honors. He was recruited to serve as an assistant to the U.S. Supreme Court, the fast track to power and prestige. But he turned it all down. Instead, he decided to represent poor men and women on Georgia's death row. There isn't much money or prestige in that. He lives in a small efficiency apartment. He works long hours and often, in the end, his clients are still executed. Tani Campolo explains the difference between these two men with these words. To be full of the Spirit is to have your heart broken by the things that break the hearts of God. To be miserable is to exchange the joy of healing the brokenhearted, whether as a doctor, lawyer, waitress, or a janitor, for baubles and beads. Baubles? I don't know what that is. This doesn't mean we all have to become inner city lawyers or missionaries to Haiti. We must find that place of joy for both of us and the world. Buchner wrote, "If you really get a kick out of your work, you've met requirement A, but if your work is writing cigarette ads, the chances are you've missed requirement B. On the other hand, if your work is being a doctor in a leper colony, you've probably met requirement. But if most of the time you were bored and depressed by it, the chances are you have not only bypassed, but probably aren't helping your patient much either." Neither the hair shirt nor the soft berth will do. The place God calls you to is where your deep gladness and the world's deep hunger meet. Of course, the deepest gladness comes when we realize that the world's deepest hunger is for men and women who approach every task in life with grace and joy. In the end, when we've finally been humbled by God's love for us and inspired to love others with this same exuberance, living graciously in any and every situation becomes a possibility. Brother Lawrence of the Resurrection, a 17th century French monk who spent most of his life cleaning pots and pans, managing to bring to that task a mindfulness of spirit he called practicing the presence of God. He said, "We ought not to be weary of doing little things for the love of God, who regards not the greatness of the work, but the love with which it is performed." We all begin by seeking gracious work, but with the maturity comes the ability to work graciously. Several years ago, I read an article about Henry Nouwen, a Catholic monk and renowned writer. Toward the end of his life, Nouwen had become overwhelmed by a busy speaking and writing career. Trying to maintain his spiritual center, he served in a Canadian monastery that cared for severely handicapped persons. When the reporter went to interview Nouwen, he asked the receptionist where he could find the famous man. He was directed down a hallway to the third door on the left. He expected to find Nouwen in some cloistered office piled high with books, or gently ministering to the needs of some poor, afflicted soul. When he arrived at the third door on the left, he pushed it open to find himself a public bathroom. Certain he'd misunderstood his directions. He asked the janitor, a little man who was whistling while he scrubbed the toilet, if he could direct him to Henry Nouwen. The man looked up and said, "You found him. Do you want to make a difference in this world? Do you want the work of your hand to bring gladness, to have meaning and purpose? Do you want your gifts and efforts to meet the world's deep hunger, for your work to be the cause of much joy? Most of all, do you want to learn what Henry Nouwen had learned, how to find joy even in cleaning a toilet? How I wish this was the altar call of the church. How I wish, rather than teaching people how to invite others to church or save them in 4 easy steps, we were encouraging men and women in every walk of life to see themselves as partners in God's grand and gracious work in the world. It is time to be the salt, the leaven, and the light, to accept our responsibility to transform our world. The commitment to live graciously with family and friends and to work for a more gracious world is our true vocation. It is that to which God is calling us, regardless of our situation, occupation, or social status. Whether we are at home, at work, or at play, grace must inform every aspect of our lives. Okay, I should stop here. Please correct me if you can. Bye.